All the way from the start, I can feel it in my heart, like all the way from the start.
Hey, what's going on out there? I'm Sean Devine. Hope you all are doing well. Today we're going to be mixing our vocals that were recorded with the USB mic, the Rode NT USB. I did a video previously on how to record your USB mic vocals, get the optimal settings, get everything the way we need it for this process. So if you missed that video, I'm going to put a link to it up here in the corner. You can check that out. But once we have everything recorded, we're going to get in here and we're going to use the mixing process to give us the best possible signal, no matter what mic you're using, even if it's a USB mic that's not using, some crazy expensive preamp, we can still get a warm, nice tone out of it. So I'm going to show you how. But first, let me just point out that in the video where I recorded the signal, you saw me record the main layer. And then I went back and subsequently recorded a couple of backing layers. And then I've got two punches or overdub layers, which I'm going to be wide panning to give us more of a stereo spread here. This is just the way I generally record my verses. But let me just go ahead and play it back. I'm going to let you hear just what we have. It's going to sound kind of like a jumbled mess right now, but we're going to get that fixed here in the mixing process. So here goes. Yeah, let the beat ride out. I don't find the need to tell you all about my bank account. That ain't my goal, and this thing's stacking up zeros. Steer people to the purpose, we could be heroes. In this life when you young, think it stretch on endless. Prematurely. How did you affect the life of others? Love is all that matters, taught by my own mother. Thankful for the grass under my feet. Still keeping out for the snakes and the negativity. It's contagious, energy wasted, but glory's on the hill. I get almost tasted, I'm pushing through the fall. So you get the idea. Now the first thing that we're going to do is we are going to process these on an aux. So we're going to use a bus. And we're going to go ahead and just send this to bus 7, yeah. And I'm going to call this verse 2 aux. And we are going to do some different things in this vocal chain. Some really cool things that we're going to get to here in a minute. But right now we're going to do some more kind of standard processes, but obviously specific to this vocal that was recorded with the USB mic. The first thing is we need to treat some of the noise, because once we compress it and do some EQ, it's going to become a lot more noticeable. Now, the mic itself, I've been really impressed with how quiet this particular USB mic is, but I'm recording next to my computer and it picks up a lot of stuff. It's very sensitive, which is good. But if you have noisy lights or hard drives, in my case, my computer hard drive is a little loud, then we need to go ahead and treat that. So I'm going to use a noise gate first, just to take out any of the noise in the dead spaces or the quiet spaces here in the vocal. We could be heroes in this life when you young, but it could come to an end prematurely. And so let's just go ahead and put a basic noise gate. And I'm going to put it individually on the channels rather than just putting it on the aux, because the signal, the dynamics are going to be a little bit different across all the channels. My punches, my overdubs may be quieter than my main layers, so that would ultimately need a different threshold set on the noise gate. So we're just going to do this individually at a pretty safe level, just to make sure we're not cutting anything out. But it could come to an end prematurely, and we left looking back like, how did you affect the life of others? Love is all that matters, taught by my own mother. Thankful for the grass under my feet. Still keeping out for the snakes and the negativity. It's contagious. All right, so that sounds about right for our mains. And then we'll set a different one for our dubs here. Let's go. Prematurely. How did you affect the life of others? Taught by my own mother. Okay, that sounds about right. It's just opening and closing at the right times here. A couple of the breaths, we want to just leave those be, so I'm not going to set the noise gate as drastically. So now once we've done the noise gating on each of the individual layers, now we can go over to our aux, and I'm going to use a plugin called the NS1 by waves. This is just a very simple noise suppressor, but it's extremely effective, and it doesn't change the fundamental tone of the mic or the vocal sound, which is not the case for a lot of these noise suppressors. You've probably noticed when you put some of these plugins onto your vocal, it starts to sound kind of like robotic, and you start losing some of the integrity of the frequencies, high-end frequencies. This one, if you use it sparingly, it does not change it, if at all. Maybe very, very, very little, but you don't necessarily notice it. And once we compress an EQ, it's very subtle. So let's put that on there and let's just see what it sounds like just at 0.
Yeah, let the beat ride out. I don't find the need to tell you all about my bank account. That ain't my goal in this thing, stacking up zeros. Steer people to the purpose, we could be heroes. In this life when you young, think it stretch on endlessly, but it could come to an end prematurely, and we left looking back.
So as I pull it up there to about 20 or so, you can actually hear that the room echo is actually being reduced as well, which is a great thing about this plugin. It will actually take out some of that reverb or echo that you don't want in the vocal as well. So kind of a Swiss Army knife in terms of noise.
Yeah, let the beat ride out. I don't find the need to tell you all about my...
So if you pull it too far up, you can hear we start to lose a lot of the top end. So you want to be careful to, again, use this sparingly. But if you hit the sweet spot, it's going to take out just what you don't want.
Yeah, let the beat ride out. I don't find the need to tell you all about my bank account.
So that's with and without.
Yeah, let the beat ride out. I don't find the need to tell you all about my bank account. Love is all that matters, taught by my own mother.
So you can hear a lot more of the echo there.
Others, love is all that matters, taught by my own mother. Thankful for the grass under my feet, still keep an eye out for the snake.
So I think that sounds about right there. So we've treated the noise, I think, effectively for this one. So let's go ahead and let's move on to what's next. And our bus is going to be, or on our aux channel. Let's go ahead and EQ. And let's just see what our signal looks like from our USB mic. This is, again, is just straight signal into Logic Pro.
Others, love is all that matters, taught by my own mother. Thankful for the grass under my feet, still keeping out for the snakes and the negativity. It's contagious, energy waste.
All right, so we do have some low frequency information, which we don't need all that, but just be careful not to cut this too low. I'm going to put this at 100 just to get rid of the bassy rumble in the vocal. And then we're going to go ahead and move on to compression. So I'm going to try the, let's do a Waves plugin that has a little bit more of a vintage tone to it, which is going to be the R comp. This one it tends to kind of emulate more of like an analog hardware compressor to me. So let's try this out and see what we can do. So right now, nothing's happening. We're going to slowly pull the threshold and the ratio down and adjust the attack and release.
It's contagious, energy wasted, but glory's on the hill. I get almost tasted. My goal in this thing, stacking up zeros. Steer people to the purpose, we can be heroes. In this life when you young, think it stretch on endlessly, but it can come to an end prematurely, and we left looking back.
Okay, so I'm going to turn the attack to pretty fast, almost as fast as it'll go. Turn up the release time, and I'm just going to set that over to the side here. But now once we've got some compression on here, it's going to kind of change the dynamics of the, I'm going to level them properly now. This is just a rough kind of leveling that I had done prior during the recording. So let's just go ahead and let's bring back some of the backing layers, and then we're going to wide pan these punches here.
My goal in this thing, stacking up zeros. Steer people to the purpose, we can be heroes. In this life when you young, think it stretch on endlessly, but it can come to an end prematurely, and we left looking back like, how did you affect the life of others? Love is all that matters, taught by my own mother. Thankful for the grass under my feet, still keeping out for the snakes and the negativity. It's contagious, energy wasted, but glory's on the hill. I get almost tasted, I'm pushing through the fog. You can say what you wanna say, it's no love lost. When I see you on the other side, I hope your heart changed and you found a couple reasons to forgive your enemies. Whoa. My goal in this thing, stacking up zeros, steer people to the purpose we could be heroes. In this life when you young, think it stretch on endlessly. But
so going back to the EQ, I am hearing a little bit of a bump in our 200 to 500 range, which is just going to give us that kind of muddy, murky sound. So I'm going to take some of that out before we're feeding the compressor because we don't want to overwork our R comp here.
My goal in this thing, stacking up zeros, steer people to the purpose we could be heroes.
Another little bump up here at 500.
My goal in this thing, stacking up zeros, steer people to the purpose we could be heroes. In this life when you young, think it stretch on endlessly, but it could come to an end prematurely, and we left looking back like, how did you affect the life of others? Love is all that matters, taught by my own mother. Thankful for the grass under my feet, still keep an eye out for the snakes and the negativity. It's contagious, energy wasted, but glory's on the hill. I get almost tasted, I'm pushing through the
So I just brought back the NS1 just a little bit because I was hearing some of the high end getting cut just very slightly. So again, just be real careful about that plugin. Don't get too carried away with it. So now let's go ahead and let's do a little bit of additive EQ. As I talk about a lot, I do deductive EQ before we feed our compression, and then we do additive EQ after compression. So I'm going to, let's try a different EQ. I tend to reach for the SSL EQ all the time, but I'm going to use the SIEQ, which is by Sound Toys, has an amazing top into it, and it's just one control. So it's very, very simple in terms of function, but it sounds great. So we're just going to crank the high end a little bit.
My goal in this thing, stacking up zeros, steer people to the purpose we could be heroes. In this life when you young, think it stretch on endlessly.
So we got the high end sizzle, a little bit sibilant now. So we're going to reach for the trusty de-esser here. And I want to point something out on the de-esser here. It's a little bit different than some of the other vocals you've heard from me using this mic because, and this is the case for a lot of USB mics, the frequency curve is different. This one actually has a little bit of a high end bump to it. And so it's going to hit the de-esser a little bit differently. Now I want you to watch, I'm actually not having to pull the threshold down as far for it to start attenuating here.
My goal in this thing, stacking up zeros, steer people to the purpose we could be heroes. In this life when you young, think it stretch on endlessly, but it could come to an end prematurely, and we left looking back like, how did you affect the life of others? Love is all that matters, taught by my own mother.
So I'm attenuating about 6 dB or so. So just be really careful, keep an eye on how much is being attenuated, because this de-esser, as with all de-essers, the mic signal is going to hit them a little differently depending on what the frequency response is. So just keep that in mind. I was noticing it when I was using the de-esser on this.
My goal in this thing, stacking up zeros, steer people to the purpose we could be heroes. In this life when you young, think it stretch on endlessly, but it could come to an end prematurely, and we left looking back like, how did you affect the life of others? Love is all that matters, taught by my own mother. Thankful for the grass under my feet, still keep an eye out for the snakes and the negativity.
All right, so now I think we've got a pretty good basic tone to our vocal chain here. Now this is where we're going to get into the fun stuff for our USB mic. So a lot of you out there who are recording with USB mics, you're having issues with thin, really digital sounding vocals, and you want more of an analog kind of vintage tone. So let's jump into doing this. We're going to actually be using some parallel processing. And so what we need to do is we're going to use a send from the aux track. So we're going to be sending the complete signal of all of our vocal layers to a new aux. So I'm just going to go to bus 8, and we'll go down here and we'll call this V2 parallel, if I can spell parallel. I think that's right. And then I'm going to send 100% or at 0 to this channel, so I can solo it.
My goal in this thing, stacking up zeros, steer people to the purpose we could be heroes. In this life when you young, think it stretch on in.
And we'll get our complete aux signal being sent down there. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to put a distortion plugin or a saturation plugin, depending on how extreme you use it. But this is the Decapitator from Sound Toys. Really nice overdrive distortion saturation kind of plugin. And we're going to keep it on this A setting, which is more of like an analog sort of sound. And we're going to turn the tone down to dark. And then we've got the mix all the way up.
My goal in this thing, stacking up zeros, steer people to the purpose we could be heroes.
Okay, I'm going to do the low cut, and I'm going to set this to about 150 because we don't want to add anything below that.
My goal in this thing, stacking up zeros, steer people to the purpose we could be heroes. In this life when you...
Let's set a little higher just so we don't get too muddy down there, about 200.
My goal in this thing, stacking up zeros, steer people to...
And now we're going to move over to this drive control. I'm going to move this up.
My goal in this thing, stacking up zeros, steer people to the purpose we could be heroes. In this life when you...
Okay, so right now that does not sound particularly pleasant, but we are getting this nice sort of analog style overdrive sort of sound. So what we're going to do is we're going to subtly mix that in with our our clean aux channel. So let's just go over here now and let's solo these. I'm gonna bring it in slowly.
My goal in this thing, stacking up zeros, steer people to the purpose we could be heroes. In this life when you young, think it stretch on endlessly, but it could come to an end prematurely. And we left looking back like, how did you affect the life of others? Love is all that matters, taught by my own.
And we get this nice warm sound, adding a little bit of low end. So let me turn that off and on so you can hear what's happening.
My goal in this thing, stacking up zeros, steer people to the purpose we could be heroes. In this life when you young, think it stretch on endlessly, but it could come to an end prematurely. And we left looking back like, how did you affect the life of others? Love is all that matters.
So it's subtle, but in the context of the mix here, let's hear it with the beat now.
People to the purpose we could be heroes. In this life when you young, think it stretch on endlessly, but it could come to an end prematurely. And we left looking back like, how did you affect the life of others? Love is all that matters, taught by my own mother. Thankful for the grass under...
It immediately puts our vocal a little bit more in the forefront of the mix over the beat. Now we can try a couple of these different styles
People
here.
to the purpose we could be heroes. In this life when you young, think it stretch on endlessly, but it could come to an end prematurely.
Oh, that's nice actually. I just selected this T setting.
People to the purpose we could be heroes. In this life when you young, think it stretch on endlessly, but it could come to an end prematurely. And we left looking back like, how did you affect the life of others? Love is all that matters, taught by my own mother. Thankful for the grass under my feet, still keep an eye out for the snakes and the negativity. It's contagious, energy wasted, but glory's on the hill. I get almost tasted, I'm pushing through the fog. You can say what you wanna say, it's no love lost. When I see you on the other side, I hope your heart changed and you found a couple reasons to forgive your enemies. Whoa. Leaped over hurdles there.
All right, so we've got a pretty cool, aggressive kind of tone there. And so now I want to just add a little bit of space on it, put a little reverb, maybe a subtle fast delay. We're just going to go over here and we're going to create a new aux, or we're going to send from a new bus here. Let's just go to bus 10 and we'll go down to bus 10 and I'm going to put the Valhalla, the vintage verb. Actually, you know what? I have another reverb called Seventh Heaven. This is a newer one I've been using by Liquid Sonics. Really cool. I'm going to EQ it. I'm going to roll off the lows, some of the highs here, and then we'll go and choose a space.
Yeah, I let the beat ride out. I don't find the need to tell you all about my bank account. That ain't my goal in this thing, stacking up zeros. Steer people to the purpose we could be heroes. In this life when you young, think it stretch on endlessly, but it could come to an end prematurely. And we left looking back like, how did you affect the life of others? Love is all that matters, taught by my own mother. Thankful for the grass under my feet, still keeping... It's contagious, energy wasted, but glory's on the hill. I get almost tasted, I'm pushing through the fog. You can say what you wanna say, it's no love lost. When I see you on the other side, I hope your heart changed and you found a couple reasons to forgive your enemies. Whoa. Leaped over.
So as I've talked about in my other videos, I'm constantly going back to our faders for the layers and adjusting things as we're processing the aux. because as you change the compression or the EQ or the de-essing or even the reverb, you're going to start to hear some things about the balance that maybe need adjustment, especially when we added that saturated parallel channel that changed the dynamics or the overall tone. So we want to keep going back and making subtle adjustments there with just the essential balance, because that's really what's going to make the mix.
Yeah, I let the beat ride out. I don't find the need to tell you all about my bank account. That ain't my goal in this thing, stacking up zeros. Steer people to the purpose, we could be heroes. In this life when you young, think it stretch on endlessly.
All right, last but not least, let's just put a fast delay on here just to give us a little bit more spread. So we'll go to bus 11. Need to label these verb aux and delay aux. I still don't know if I spelled parallel right. Hopefully I did. Y'all can forgive me for my spelling in these. You're not here to learn how to spell, you're here to learn how to mix. All right, so let's just select the H delay. Go over here and let's just send this down.
Yeah, I let the beat ride out. I don't find the need to tell.
So I'm gonna switch this to like actually I'm gonna turn off the BPM sync. We're just gonna do it manually, which you can get some interesting things just by it not being locked to time. You just sort of listen and you can get things that are just slightly faster, just slightly a little slower than locked into BPM. It can be really cool. So let's try, and I'm gonna turn on ping pong. And then we're going to turn the analog off, and we'll do a high pass. We're going to roll it up above 200.
Yeah, I let the beat ride out. I don't find the need to tell you all about my bank account. That ain't my goal in this thing, stacking up zeros. Steer people to the purpose, we could be heroes. In this life when you young, think it stretch on endlessly, but it could come to an end prematurely. And we left looking back like, how did you affect the life of others? Love is all that matters, taught by my own mother. Thankful for the grass under my feet, still keeping out for the snakes and the negativity. It's contagious, energy wasted, but glory's on the hill. I get almost tasted, I'm pushing through the fog. You can say what you wanna say, it's no love lost. When I see you on the other side, I hope your heart changed and you found a couple reasons to forgive your enemies. Leaped over hurdles that
All right, y'all. So we just mixed our vocals that were recorded with a USB mic. Many of you out here have had trouble, again, just getting that nice, thick, analog, warm presence out of your USB mic because you're not using maybe a tube preamp or something that's going to give you that. But with the mixing process and using some of the techniques we talked about, using parallel channels to give you a little bit of saturation that is mixed in. Also in some of our EQ, some of the compressors that we use are going to have warmer tones to them that you can take advantage of. So it's still very possible, as you heard. I'm actually really impressed with the just the tone overall that we got out of the mic, and pleasantly surprised. So anyways, if y'all have any questions about mixing your vocals recorded with your USB mics, feel free to leave a comment below. If you learned anything in the video, please like and subscribe, and we'll talk to you soon.
Over time we see who stays by our sides, relates to our lives through darkness and the light. God grant me peace of mind. Yeah, I let the beat ride out. I don't finally need to tell you all about my bank account. That ain't my goal in this thing, stacking up zeros. Steer people to the purpose, we could be heroes. In this life when you young